Hi and welcome back. This week's California Noir is Sunset Boulevard. It's the story of Norma Desmond, a retired former movie star of the silent screen of the 20s, and of Joe Gillis, an unemployed screenwriter half her age. She hires him to write a script, takes him as a lover, and then murders him in a jealous rage when he wants to leave her. You all have available the terms and concepts sheet to follow along during the so, of all the California dreams, the dream of success and fame in Hollywood is the most alluring and most famous dream, and its failure the most bitter, especially in the face of competitors' success. Success is always temporary, failure is forever. As Dame Judi Dench once said about the Oscars, as you're sitting there in the auditorium, it gradually takes on a more and more depressive atmosphere the closer one gets to the climax of the big awards: best screenplay, best director, best actor, best actress, finally, best picture, the more depressive the mood becomes in the general audience. Why? Because for every new Oscar winner that night, there are also 5 or 6 losers in the audience. And every loser is a person with significant talent. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been nominated for an Oscar in the first place. It's merely that they weren't good enough. And so in Sunset Boulevard, the desperate desire to succeed before the cameras is the ruling passion. The aged Norma Desmond wants to return to the movies as a great star forever young, to be worshipped again on the screen as her younger self was. But it's a cruel illusion, and the impossibility of that desire is what makes Norma Norma. Joe Gillis, on the other hand, wants to move up to become a serious literary artist from being a hack B-movie screenwriter, turning out B-movie trash in order to eat. But it's Joe's failure to secure work that in the ruthlessly competitive occupation, the occupation of screenwriting, that propels him into Norma Desmond's Sunset Mansion, running from creditors. And he only escapes his poverty and debts by accepting the corrupt working relationship Norma proposes, prostituting himself to Norma first intellectually to edit and rewrite her ridiculous Salome script, and then even physically, out of pity for Norma, but also in order to simply survive. In the structure of the film, young Betty Schaefer represents the conventional good girl. She's idealistic about screenwriter writing, critically confronts Joe for writing down to the audience, wants films that mean something, falls in love sincerely with Joe, and is horrified to find out that Joe has sold himself to Norma. Joe at first sneers at her as one of those message kids, but later in the film, Betty rekindles in Joe his original enthusiasm for writing as they work together on a good script idea. Yet when he reveals his living situation at the mansion to Betty, he also confesses that he can't live in poverty with her, though in the end he regrets this choice and he tries to leave Norma, so she ends up killing him. If Joe's relationship with Norma represents the corruption of the Hollywood writer, Betty represents youthful idealism. But Joe Gillis is caught between these two poles, between these potential lovers, art and love with Betty versus money and luxury with Norma. And that tug of war proves fatal. The screenwriter parents of my best friends in Hollywood also wrote Flipper, about an intelligent dolphin. Made a lot of money. Nevertheless, Betty herself is already a second generation part of the industry. She's part of the system. And she's enamored of the Hollywood dream too. She too has her ambitions, like Norma and like Joe. And in her case, it's to move up the ladder from being a mere script reader to being a serious screenwriter. These three characters all know the California dream at its most seductive, the Hollywood dream, its sudden fame and wealth and glory. But all three also know how cruelly competitive everything in Hollywood really is. Norma is a has-been. Joe is a never was. Betty's at the bottom of the ladder. In Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood is a prison system disguised as an opportunity, disguised as a paradise. Yet it was made by Billy Wilder, who was himself a huge Hollywood success, like Dame Judi Dench was, one of the few. Sunset Boulevard has a great film noir director in Billy Wilder, and we were talking about the dark photography, a great film noir cinematographer in John Seitz, the photographer who did Double Indemnity. And it has a narrative structure that provides the ultimate in Double Indemnity's flashback technique. Namely, the narrator is already dead. That was a first. An older woman, one-time silent film superstar Norma Desmond is certainly an unconventional femme fatale, but a femme fatale she is, nevertheless. Norma's story provides us not only with telling commentary on the gender politics of aging in Hollywood, but also a commentary on how dreams of Hollywood glory can founder against the heartlessness of the film industry itself. Even her contemporary, C.B. DeMille, who at 70 is still directing films, has moved on from has-been Norma who's only 50. In Wilder's Hollywood, beneath the glamour, everyone is desperate. This actually, Sunset Boulevard was part of a whole series of Hollywood noir films that came out in the early 50s that present a very negative picture of Hollywood. Another example is In a Lonely Place by Nicholas Ray, where the screenwriter is a murderer. It's not the one who's murdered. It's probably a murderer. There's a real story about the sound revolution here that Norma was victimized by. Sound delivers us our emotions. It gave Hollywood filmmakers more power to stoke the emotions of audiences than silent films did. Silent films, which often had to have interspersed title cards explaining what was going on. The technological change came very suddenly, and it had a huge impact on careers. Some silent movie stars had great faces, but their voices didn't translate well to sound movies. Their careers couldn't survive the transition to sound. Handsome John Gilbert, a first-rank star in silence, had a high-pitched, reedy voice. When sound came, it ended his career. Beautiful Vilma Banky had a heavy Hungarian accent. Well, so much for her. She didn't survive the transition. Neither did the great actor Emil Jannings, a front-rank star in silence, but he had a heavy German accent. Didn't matter when it was silent film, and he had to return to Europe. And some actors and actresses couldn't make the transition to sound not because of their voices, but because they couldn't change the exaggerated, emotive acting style, pantomime really, that had been required in silence. They couldn't make the transition to a more naturalistic performance, which was required by sound. Norma Desmond is one. I'll talk more about the impact of this shift in a couple of minutes. But with Norma, there's something else. It was also the merciless Hollywood impact of aging. Momentary fame is not a sanctuary against the passing of the years. Everyone is talented, and there's always someone younger, prettier, more energetic coming along. Something you have to realize, everybody in Hollywood is talented. Despite Norma's belief that as a star, she is eternally youthful and merely awaits the industry's invitation for her to return, her dilapidated mansion merely cushions Norma from the reality that she's been forgotten. In the scene at Paramount Pictures, C.B. DeMille grimly notes that 30 million fans have given her the brush. Very hard to live with. Okay, so that's kind of a general background of what's going on, what the issues are in the film. But I want to give a summary of the major events in the plot so that we're all on the same page when we're discussing the movie later. And if you've got complicated questions, just put them in chat. So Joe Gillis is a down on his luck Hollywood screenwriter He says, I seem to have lost my touch. Maybe my scripts weren't original enough. Maybe they were too original. His latest screenplay fails both with his friend Betty, the script reader, and his Paramount producer. The producer refuses to give Desperate Joe a job and also refuses to get him a loan. That's Hollywood. He's finished in Hollywood. Out of money, pursued down Sunset Boulevard by agents seeking to repossess his car. He's 3 months behind in payment. Joe, to escape, takes the car into a dark driveway of an old mansion. It turns out to be the home of Norma Desmond, the silent screenplay, played by the real silent screen star Gloria Swanson. Norma is attended by her servant butler Max, played by the real silent director Erich von Stroheim. The von in von Stroheim, by the way, is false. Stroheim was actually Jewish, not a German aristocrat. That's Hollywood too. Norma and Max persuade Joe to move into the mansion. Joe's job will be to help Norma with the script she's writing, which she hopes will return her to stardom, a biblical epic, Salome, with herself in the sexy title role, even though she's 50. Joe helps edit the script, which privately he knows is a vast, hopeless mess. Gradually, Norma's attention becomes amorous. Joe becomes a kept man, provided with elegant clothes, chauffeured around by Max. Norma, visiting the Paramount lot with Joe, tries to get her old director, C.B. DeMille, played by C.B. DeMille, to take the Salome script, but he finds a gentle way to decline it. Meanwhile, Joe, played by William Holden, longing to leave Norma's sick world, ends up working nights on a new good script with Betty, falls in love with her, and eventually, psychologically desperate, he confesses his living situation. Pushed by Betty's horror at it, he then walks out on Norma, but Norma crying, no one ever leaves a star. That's what makes them a star. She shoots Joe, who falls dead into the swimming pool she'd refurbished and filled for him. There's one more scene in Sunset Boulevard, its most famous scene, I guess. Norma, sinking now into madness, takes the assembled newsreel cameras and police cameras for studio cameras. She descends the staircase playing Salome and ends the film with the line, I'm ready for my close-up, CB, as a camera dolly-ins on her gargoyle face. Okay, so some commentary. Sunset Boulevard is the first film to wrap a narrative entirely around a mature actress left behind by the film industry. Hollywood has forgotten Norma because of her age and because the arrival of talkies initiated a dramatic shift in acting styles which she could not accommodate. As Norma herself exclaims after declaring that she is still big, but it's the pictures that got small, quote, you had the eyes of the whole world, but that wasn't good enough. Oh no, you wanted the ears of the world too. So they opened up their big mouths and out came talk, 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 talk. Words, 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 more words. You've made a rope of words and strangled the business, strangled it. But don't worry, there's a microphone right here to catch the last gurgle and Technicolor to photograph its swollen red tongue. Norma in her decrepit mansion is an example of the typical California noir theme of great expectations, initial gigantic success, strike it rich, followed by stunned disappointment. That's what makes California noir noir. Sunset Boulevard also begins with one of the most famous images in film history, a dead screenwriter floating face down in a swimming pool. I think lots of studio executives found that amusing. Joe Gillis always said he wanted his own swimming pool. Well, he's got it now. The image exploits a particular iconography of Hollywood dreams, in which the private swimming pool in semi-arid Southern California is the ultimate symbol of success. It was there in water-starved Los Angeles that the private swimming pool first became a prime symbol of status and wealth. In the 1920s of Norma Desmond, one of the first private swimming pools and the most famous was a 100-foot-long swimming pool at the Hollywood mansion of the movie stars Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. It was an unheard of luxury. This issue of water in Los Angeles will come up again, of course, in Chinatown. But the swimming pool of Norma Desmond is empty, dry, with rats in the dry swimming pool eating rotting oranges. Even in 1950, oranges were still the symbol of the California dream. It's important to remember that Riverside County, with its orange groves, was once the richest county in the United States. But rotting oranges is a symbol of decay. And soon the refilled swimming pool, refilled for Joe Gillis's benefit, will be polluted with his floating corpse. That is the ultimate symbol of the failed California dream. Gloria Swanson's brilliant depiction of silent screen acting style explains why Norma Desmond has been left behind. Without spoken dialogue, the performance style of early films required sweeping, heightened, and often seemingly to modernize excessive displays of face and body movement to convey the truth of a character through what is essentially mime. This miming style came directly out of live theater, where most people couldn't get close up to the actors' faces. Invoking the miming style of acting, Gloria Swanson highlights Norma's speeches with flourishes and movements. Her face is capable of enormous mobility. She throws her mouth open and raises or lowers her eyes, and she uses her animated hands like claws for visual effect. It's a brilliant performance. I want to talk for a minute about William Holden. In contrast, he's the male figure and it is a talky actor. But William Holden's father brought the family from Illinois, where Holden was born, to Southern California in 1923, another immigrant story. Holden's father was an industrial chemist and a successful one, becoming the head of George Gooch Laboratories. So there's a classic California immigrant success story. Until, that is, Holden's father fell ill, felled by exposure to toxic chemicals. Once more, that's the other half of the California story. The family was culturally conservative, big Republicans, and always disapproved of Holden going into acting. They disapproved of him as an actor even after he won an Academy Award. Holden was only too well aware of both his father's illness and father's disapproval. He developed a serious alcohol problem. But Holden's low-key performance, the product of a career in sound movies, contrasts very sharply with the oversized and Baroque style that Swanson uses to depict Norma's estrangement from the modern. Note that the Joe Gillis character actually has a basic similarity to Double Indemnity's Walter Neff. That is, Joe, like Neff, is a cynic and bitter, unsatisfied with his position, who thinks he can take advantage of the fantasies of a woman. Joe Gillis is a bit like Chinatown's Jake Gittes, too. He thinks he knows what's going on, but really he doesn't. Both Walter Neff and Joe Gillis end up shot dead, of course, by the person they thought they were manipulating. Sunset Boulevard, I want to now talk about the economic and political background to the film. Sunset Boulevard was made in early 1949 as the Hollywood Red Hunt was accelerating. This was House Un-American Activities Committee investigations. Billy Wilder opposed the blacklist and gave generously to leftist causes. His political activity cost him friends, including a year after the making of Sunset Boulevard, where he played a bit part, direct insults from the Red Hunter C.B. DeMille at a meeting of the Directors Guild, who DeMille satirized him as a pinko, satirized his German accent. But Joe Gillis isn't broke and desperate because of his politics. There isn't any politics in the film. His problem is something else. The changing economic needs of the studio, changing financial needs of the studio. This has to do with the fact that in 1948, the federal government had a successful antitrust case against Paramount Pictures, which forced the divestment of all the studio's exhibition change. That is, the studios owned the distribution theaters, and the distribution theaters had to take as product whatever the studios produced if the studios owned the theaters. And the Supreme Court said you can't have that, it's a monopoly. So studios then had to reduce costs, and one way they did was by cutting B-movie production, the kind of movie Joe Gillis had been writing. Without the theater chains they owned, which were forced to show the movies that the studio gave them, no matter how bad the quality, the studios didn't have the incentive to make cheap B-movies anymore, to fill theater houses with double bills each week. I don't know whether folks remember, but the double bill, that is 2 movies for 1 ticket, was the norm into the 1960s. But with the studio's annual production slate reduced, because they weren't able to force B-movies on the theaters, there was less need for screenwriters. Joe Gillis got caught in this squeeze. Some of the B-movie writers like him would eventually be rescued by television. Private Eye series like Peter Gunn, or 77 Sunset Strip, or police procedural series like Dragnet, or westerns like Gunsmoke or Half Gun Will Travel. But in 1949, these shows were still 5 years away. Too late for Joe. He's out of a job. Ironically, Norma Desmond, though she is comfortably wealthy, is trying just like Joe to sell a script. Her script for the biblical epic Salome, starring herself. She's so desperate to appear before the cameras again that in one scene she tells C.B. DeMille she'll forego salary and more. She'll even finance the film Salome herself. She just wants to work again. And that's when DeMille gently tells her that she knows nothing about acting in pictures with sound. It's just not the histrionic acting style of the silence. The brutal competitive employment conditions in Hollywood meant that Joe Gillis, failing to sell his script ideas, is soon being treated as a leper. That no one will hire him establishes exactly what he has in common with Norma Desmond. No one will hire her either. And there's more here, a really tragic story. Billy Wilder says the inspiration for making the film came from a real-life incident of Hollywood cruelty that he personally witnessed. He was the screenwriter for Sunset Boulevard as well as its director. And he was in a Hollywood restaurant with his co-writer when he saw a drunk being kicked out of the restroom. And that drunk shouted, "How dare you? I made this town." And that drunk was the pioneering director, D.W. Griffith. And Griffith was right. He made Hollywood. Both Griffith's Birth of a Nation and 10 years later, Greed, whatever one thinks of their politics, demonstrated what the new camera technology could actually offer audiences in terms of really stunning spectacles. But Griffith was only a has-been now, and Billy Wilder saw what happens to has-beens in Hollywood. And so we get Norma Desmond reacting with rage at at DeMille's rejection of her, and her cry of rage is intentionally parallel to what Wilder heard D.W. Griffith shout, "I made Paramount." And in fact, Gloria Swanson did make Paramount. Bill Holden was a good actor, but it's Gloria Swanson who dominates every scene in the movie that she's in. She has Max pay Joe's back rent, move his things to the spare room over the garage, tells Joe to spit out his chewing gum, does not care about the repo man towing away his car. She has Joe then moved into the husband's bedroom right next to her. She has him dress in a 1920s style tuxedo, gives him a solid gold cigarette case, leads him in a tango on the dance floor, a tango inspired by Rudolph Valentino. Joe unwillingly, or perhaps wittingly, takes on the role of the leading man in Norma's cinematic 1920s fantasy. She refashions him to fit her image of early Hollywood masculinity. And he goes along with it. Can a 50-year-old be a femme fatale? Norma might be the living dead, but Wilder and Gloria Swanson transform her into the controlling and seductive mother. She uses, and in the end, she uses her ultimate power over him, pathos, pity, and money. And so even though Joe is the narrator in the flashback from when he's dead in the swimming pool, a situation like the dying Walter Neff, the narrator in Double Indemnity, it's Norma who is unforgettable, larger than life. She is the great figure in the film. But the film's main point is to give the lie to the view of the Hollywood studio as in any way a paternalistic or humane institution. Norma is thrown away by the industry, and so is Joe. Too rigid to adapt to the revolutionary new technology in the one case, not enough talent in the other. The theme is of an industry and the audience too, as heartless and fickle, uncaring exploiters of fragile talent, and always ready to move on to someone new. Again, Billy Wilder was a huge success in Hollywood, and his 50s are going to be his most successful decade. And yet he made this film, and he's with Judi Dench in pointing out what's actually going on psychologically in Hollywood. And that brings us to a bit about the production. What's striking in the production history is that as early as 1940, Wilder had written a note to himself for this project, quote, "Silent film star commits murder. When they arrest her, she sees the newsreel cameras and thinks she's back in the movies." Thus, the most famous final scene in Sunset Boulevard came into existence in Wilder's imagination by itself as a one-off thing, long years, almost a decade, before anything else was done with the film. He had that ending from the beginning. Other projects intervened, but it was in 1946 that Wilder and his co-writer Charles Brackett witnessed the terrible scene in the restaurant where the barkeep throws out Hollywood great D.W. Griffith, who's now merely a forgotten drunk. That scene, a real-life event, re-energized the early idea of a movie about Hollywood. By 1948, Wilder and Brackett had their Hollywood story, and with a retired female silent screen star as an important character. But at that point, Sunset Boulevard was a comedy about a harried head of a studio, the main character, dealing with a rattled old female silent picture star, a bit like the modern TV show, The Studio. And because it was a comedy, they were thinking of Mae West for the part. Both writers thought that would be hilarious. So a comedy with the Norma Desmond figure, a somewhat dotty but ultimately very likable older lady. That would have been an interesting movie, I have to say. What changed it was Wilder's friend, the director George Cukor. He did the great comedy, The Philadelphia Story, and also Gaslight in 1944, which is how you would get the term gaslighting, meaning lying. Cukor brought Gloria Swanson together with Wilder for Sunset Boulevard. Cukor was a friend of both, put them together. Again, in Hollywood, it's always who you know. Wilder was now thinking of the project as a drama anyway, but Wilder was delighted to make the connection with Gloria Swanson because his first job in Hollywood had actually been for a Gloria Swanson talkie in 1934. And he knew what she could do. Yet, unlike her character Norma Desmond, the real Gloria Swanson made talkies, yes, for 15 years after the coming of sound. Her last had been in 1941, so only 8 years before Sunset Boulevard. But bringing her on board changed the entire nature of the project. The reason was she was great. Her screen test stunned them with the ferocity of Norma Desmond. Gloria Swanson wrote gleefully to her friend, "Oh, the part is fabulous, but even better and bigger once they saw my screen test." And she was right. How did Gloria Swanson get to Hollywood from New York? She disliked flying and took the train. Most people in 1949 still did. Commercial airplane flights from New York to Los Angeles in 1949 took 14 hours with stops and were noisy and uncomfortable. So she took the train, but the train took 3 days. That's how isolated California still was from the rest of the country. It took 3 days to get there by train, which is how most people came. And Gloria Swanson herself is actually a fabulous, amazing figure. Despite her portrayal of the retired recluse Norma Desmond, who disdains the modern film world, not only had Gloria Swanson starred in talkies for 15 years, in 1949, she was not only not retired, she'd already been hosting a pioneer TV talk show in New York for a full year, starting in 1948. She's a pioneering TV talk show host. She also had a successful clothing line based in New York, too. She was a vegetarian, a yoga enthusiast, a pioneering health food advocate, and later in life, a women's rights advocate. She was also a hardline anti-communist who nevertheless vouched officially for John Lennon, the Beatle, when he wanted permanent residence in the US. He was a neighbor of hers. Swanson had played both comedy and drama in the silent period. Wilder said she used to ride in a sedan chair carried by men from her dressing room to the set in the 20s. She was known for her lavish lifestyle and many husbands. Her business acumen, she was a millionaire, was guided by her long-term lover, Joseph Kennedy. That's right, the father of JFK. He made her wealthy right to the end of her life. Shockingly, she was only 50 in 1949. They played her much older, putting gray into her hair, and that took courage on her part. But Swanson was nothing if not courageous and experimental. George Cukor, Wilder's friend, convinced her that Wilder was an absolute genius and that this was a great career opportunity, which it turned out to be. And because she joined the project, Wilder and his co-writer expanded the role of Norma Desmond in the screenplay. Wilder ended the film. They created this part much larger than it had been. Wilder ended the film with the highest opinion of her talent and professionalism, which he'd seen back in 1934. Such a hard worker, a real thoroughbred. We paid her $150,000 for Sunset Boulevard, an enormous sum in those days. It's like $10 million now. And it was one of the great bargains in all of film history. And it goes beyond dominating the screen, which she does in every scene that she's in. Swanson made a major correction in the script. If Norma Desmond owned oil wells and $1 million in cash, then Joe Gillis wouldn't have found her living in a rundown apartment as he did in the original script. Swanson objected. However dramatic it might be for Joe Gillis to discover her like that, how art the mighty fallen, it made no sense. A mansion it would have to be. As a millionaire herself, Swanson knew what she was talking about. So they had to change the script and find a mansion for her. And further, once filming began, Wilder and his co-writer Brackett consulted with Swanson daily to find out what Norma would say in this situation or that situation, and adapted the screenplay according to her advice. This was an extraordinary change in behavior. for Wilder. Because he was both the screenwriter and director so often, Wilder was notorious for demanding that his actors stick exactly to what he'd written in the script. No changes, no improvisations, not even minor ones. For screenwriters who normally lost control over their written words once they'd sold the script and the transfer to film began, we'll come across another example of this with Robert Towne in Chinatown. Wilder's situation as both director and writer was a dream. He had several fights with Marilyn Monroe over her unwillingness to stick word for word on the great comedy Some Like It Hot in 1959. But with Gloria Swanson, alone of all his actors, Wilder actually sought her advice on script changes and adapted them. Still, Joe Gillis is still the narrator, and the story is told from his point of view, a protagonist who tries to take advantage of an older woman, only to find himself possessed by her materially, financially, psychologically, sexually. The role of Joe Gillis, by the way, was originally contracted to the exquisitely handsome Montgomery Clift, not to Bill Holden. Montgomery Clift was a rising star after a terrific performance in the Great Western Red River, which we'll see next fall. But Clift backed out of Sunset Boulevard with only a month to go before principal photography began. He claimed that at age 28, he couldn't convincingly play the lover of a woman twice his age. Wilder thought that was bunk, disliked Clift ever after, because Clift, in real life in 1949, was then living with a tobacco heiress 15 years his senior. But whatever the situation, suddenly at the last minute, Wilder and Brackett were left without a leading man. Such were the perils of making movies. Wilder thought of the young Burt Lancaster for the part of Joe Gillis. Wouldn't that have been interesting? And also considered the young Marlon Brando for the part of Joe Gillis. That would have been interesting too, especially opposite Mae West. That would have been interesting. But they settled instead on the Paramount contract player Bill Holden, whose real name, by the way, was William Beadle Jr. Holden was had a mediocre career. He made a string of mediocre films for the past 10 years. He was 31, getting older, and his career was going nowhere. He felt himself a failure, which Wilder thought made him perfect for the role of Joe Gillis. This was Holden's only big chance. He was at the end of his career, a mediocre career. This was his only big chance, and he made the most of it. He gave a terrific, cynical performance and was nominated for the Academy Award as Best Actor of 1950. So after 10 years in Hollywood, like prospectors who have found nothing, he suddenly struck it rich. Sunset Boulevard made him a sudden star. Swanson, too, was nominated for Best Leading Actress. And one must say that in the end, it's Norma, as played by Gloria Swanson, who owns this movie. Wilder employed many real Hollywood location sites for the film to make it a sense of verisimilitude. Scenes along the real Sunset Boulevard, including a real street sign, that's the first thing you see as the credits roll. The real Schwab's drugstore, the real Beverly Hills shopping street and upscale stores of 1949, a real mansion located on Wilshire Boulevard, not Sunset Boulevard, the real El Nido apartments, Franklin and Ivar, that was Joe's apartment. But of course, in a central sequence of the film, we get to see the entire real Paramount Studio Pictures lot in Culver City, including the famous what's called the Bronson Gate entrance to the great studio, a two-story arch in the style of Spanish Baroque. We go with Norma onto the real Soundstage 18, where we find the real C.B. DeMille at work just completing filming the real biblical epic Samson and Delilah. Norma's stardom in our fictional story was, we're told, fundamental to the establishment of Paramount Pictures as the first major movie studio. In the real world, so was real Gloria Swanson's stardom fundamental in establishing Paramount. It became a tremendous star in silent pictures, tremendously profitable for Paramount, and especially during the time when she worked continually under C.B. DeMille himself between 1918 and 1925. Though she left Paramount as a result of a contract dispute, in her memoirs, Gloria Swanson idolizes DeMille as a director, describing him as working on a level far above the rest of Hollywood. But in the film, Norma Desmond has to be shown what a soundstage is. The real Gloria Swanson didn't, and had to be shown it by DeMille himself. Now, the purpose of a soundstage, in case people don't understand this, is that it's an enclosed set, and it's enclosed in order to record the spoken dialogue of the actors clearly and correctly with as little background noise as possible. That's what silence on the set means, because they're trying to record the dialogue. The sound stages came equipped with enormous swinging overhead boom microphones to capture dialogue clearly. Actors had to put up with these looming boom microphones over their heads as they spoke their dialogue, and to project a sense of reality under these very artificial conditions. Frankly, silent film actors had much freer experience than sound actors did. This situation endured until the invention of small wireless microphones carried by the actors themselves in their clothes, which freed from the constraints and stress caused by the looming overhead booms. The pioneering film to do this was John Borman's Point Blank, which we're going to see later in the course. But in Sunset Boulevard, as Norma Desmond is sitting on DeMille's own director's chair, a boom microphone accidentally swings by, brushing the top of her head. Norma, scowling impatiently, brushes it away like it's a fly. And one has to say, in this famous visit to Paramount in the movie, in contrast to Norma the has-been, C.B. DeMille is still the man in charge at Paramount, the studio which actually he had founded, and also running the vast operation of Samson and Delilah. This is so even though DeMille is an old man, nearing 70, 20 years older than Norma Desmond, old enough to be her father. But meanwhile, Norma is a washed up and discarded actress at 50, no longer young and beautiful enough to attract audiences. The heartless gender differential in power in Hollywood couldn't be clearer. And it won't surprise you to learn that Louis B. Mayer thought of Billy Wilder as a traitor for showing this. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Because Mayer is another story about old in Hollywood. Paramount gave Sunset Boulevard a special premiere screening for Hollywood big shots, and among them was Louis B. Mayer, the fearsome head of the rival Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer MGM Studios. And he not only hated the film, but he caused a public scene. He saw that Sunset Boulevard depicted Hollywood as a system that used up beauty and talent and then heartlessly threw it away when it was no longer bringing in the money. In front of the entire audience, Mayer raged at Wilder after seeing the film. "You bastard. You've disgraced the industry that made you and fed you. You should be tarred and feathered and run out of Hollywood." Wilder says he answered, "Go fuck yourself." But then Wilder was notoriously a teller of tales about himself. It's hard to imagine anyone saying that to Louis B. Mayer. But Louis B. Mayer was 65 when he caused this scene at the premiere of Sunset Boulevard. And in 1950, as the movie was coming out, he was already under increasing attack as an aged studio head who was behind the times in his tastes and was therefore losing money for MGM, the studio he founded. The claim was that the films he okayed were too stodgy and too sugary for the post-war audience. They were losing money, and in Hollywood, follow the money. So the very next year, 1951, the executives of MGM's parent company, Lowe's, forced Mayer into retirement from the studio he'd founded and which bore his name. Mayer was bitter, and he was replaced by a man 20 years younger. Get the point. Meanwhile, Wilder and Swanson became the toast of the town, and it was the making of Bill Holden's career. People preferred to see the film not so negatively, but rather as showing Norma and Joe and Betty and CB all motivated by an intense fascination with an intense love of movie making, that the movie is about the love of movie making. The characters in the film were mesmerized by it, desperate for it. And there's real reality in this too. C.B. DeMille, 6 years later, suffered a heart attack in Egypt on the location set of the Ten Commandments. In fact, it's during the big scene where the children of Israel are leaving Egypt in a huge, vast, hundreds and hundreds of extras. He's up on top of one of the Egyptian buildings, and he suffers a heart attack while they're filming. And he says, "Keep on going." They film, they bring the filming of that scene to an end, and then he's taken down from that building in a stretcher. 3 days later, he's back directing. That's what mesmerized by Hollywood filmmaking is. Billy Wilder went on to his greatest decade as a director-screenwriter in the 50s, equally at home in comedies as well as dramas, the driving force behind Stalag 17, Sabrina, The 7-Year Itch, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment. Nancy Olson was the good girl, Betty Schaefer, and she gave a promising performance in Sunset Boulevard, but the fact was she lacked the animal magnetism and dramatic range to be a great movie star. She made some more films, actually all with William Holden, all mediocre, but she married the composer Alan Lerner in 1950 and left Hollywood. Nancy Olson was an influence on the order of songs in Lerner's huge hit, which was My Fair Lady. The love song, I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face, is dedicated to her. In her autobiography, she wrote when she was in her 90s, she declared that observing the fates of Norma Desmond and Joe Gillis up close in Sunset Boulevard made it easier for her to leave Hollywood. Quote, "I didn't want to be a movie star who would someday be thrown away. I didn't want to be a movie star who would someday be thrown away." So Sunset Boulevard is still studied in film schools and still written about. The latest, one can say, she lived into her 90s. Bill Holden died of really cirrhosis of the liver when he was about 60. Tyrone Power, the great film star of the 40s, died of a heart attack at age 44. That's what Hollywood does to people. Sunset Boulevard is still studied in film schools and still written about. The latest full-length study based on Paramount Studio production archives, some of which I've discussed, that book came out in 2025. So it's still alive. It's still viewed as a landmark statement on the perils of celebrity culture. It's an indictment of Hollywood vanity, the cultural imperative of being seen, regardless of the cost. And being seen is an interesting thing because in 2026, because of our new social media, we can all be Norma Desmond. We can all be visible to a potentially huge audience. Ready for my close-up, CB? Okay. So let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back for discussion. Yes, Singing in the Rain is another example of yes, it's a musical and has a lot of bright numbers in it, but it's also about uh, the failure of an actress to make the transition from silent films to sound because her voice is just high and scratchy and irritating. So this was actually, you know, every technical advance has its casualties. And certainly in Sunset Boulevard, Norma is an example of one of those tragedies, one of those casualties. Although what I take heart from is the fact that Gloria Swanson was not a casualty. She was playing a casualty, but she's someone who survived the transition, and more than that, survived became a pioneering TV talk show host, TV in 1948. It's just amazing that she would do, and later uh, uh, spoke up in favor of John Lennon not being expelled from the United States. So she's quite an interesting person in her own right, and gleeful about what a great performance she gave in her screen test. What self-confidence she had. Of course, she was also a multimillionaire thanks to Joe Kennedy. Uh, okay,
Art, there's a chat from Shelley, Art.
what's that?
Chat from Shelley. Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
You can see it, I'm sure.
Um, let's see. The
Please comment on Max and what and
Oh,
who he.
Max.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, it's a very strange thing because Max von Stroheim was a famous director in the 20s and a famous actor. He was the German commander in Rules of the Game, the great French anti-war film. And um, there's and in the film he was also married to Norma Desmond at one point and can't leave her because he's so enamored of her. Uh, I mean, there's obviously a lot of sadomasochism going on in this movie, and he's an example of someone. Well, is he a masochist? I don't know. He's actually controlling a lot. It's hard to know, uh, but the actual Max von Stroheim is a fake. He's his parents were Jewish business people in Vienna. He's not a German aristocrat. It's the thing that you could get away with, and just like Bill Holden's name is not Bill Holden. His real name is William Beadle, Bedle Jr., an unfortunate name that obviously they couldn't keep. Uh, uh, by contrast, somebody like Sissy Spacek is her real name. She's Czech in origin, and of course, she never lived in Hollywood. They live in Virginia. She and her husband, uh, uh, precisely to stay away from Hollywood fakeness. Uh, Cher Burgian has a question.
Well, I wanted to comment about Max's character. I think in the some that one of the films that that Norma shows in the viewing room is Queen Kelly.
Yes,
And that was from the late 20s, and Eric von Stroheim was actually the director of most of it. And then
that's
he
right.
gets fired by Swanson when they had difficulty.
Right.
So there's that kind of interesting parallel of the what's going on in the film that we just watched and what actually went on in real life with Swanson and
Why do you
von
suppose
Stroheim.
that Billy Wilder decided to go with to go with Joseph von Stroheim as Max, given
Mm,
that history, which people would have known, which he would have known?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess he just liked the spark.
I think he included Max to give a nod to the 1920s, expressionistic movie style, which
Yes.
that I think that's just a nod to the way the movies were made and the directors that made those movies to contrast with the actual movie that we're watching. Yeah.
Well, the people were saying, Doug, before we started, that this movie is extraordinarily dark. I mean, physically dark. And this is German Expressionism, and Wilder was influenced by German Expressionism a lot, as opposed to the smooth, uh, uh, sentimental Hollywood movies. And it's fair to ask, how did he get away with this experimental style, which is the film noir style? And the answer is, well, Double Indemnity made 143% on its investment.
Mm-hmm.
So people are willing to go, the executives are willing to go with whatever makes money. That's why Jaws and Star Wars, 25 years later, destroyed the small personal film that had been made in Hollywood, starting really with Easy Rider, because suddenly they could see that blockbusters could make, oh, who cares about making $40 million when you make $740 million?
Art, there's a chat from Richard Bayer for you.
Let me see.
Watching the film in 2026.
Let me go back. Yeah, on top there. It's you could see it as a campy comedy as much as a film noir. Well, you can see that originally they thought of it as a comedy, and that would have been interesting. And there are parts of it that are satire, and that's clear with Gloria Swanson batting away the overhead mic, the boom microphone, or the sleazy producer who won't give Joe a break and not even loan him any money. And somebody said the burying the chimp. He arrives as they're burying the pet chimp. And on the one hand, I think this was an example. Gloria Swanson was famous for her extravagant lifestyle in the 20s. So having a pet chimp or having a pet leopard, that was cool for movie stars then. But it's fair to say, well, he's the chimp. That is, Joe is the chimp. He's the chump in this movie, although he thinks he's actually the person controlling things. In fact, this is one of the things to say about all the protagonists, except Dirty Harry, as we'll see. All the protagonists in the movies that we are watching, all the male protagonists are in fact chumps. And they look like they're the protagonists and the heroes, but in fact, they don't know what they're dealing with. And we'll see that especially in Vertigo next week. And actually, it's one of the reasons that Jimmy Stewart never worked with Alfred Hitchcock again. But this is, it's a fact that what is being shown in Hollywood about Hollywood was true. Like I said, the parents of my friends who had written Leave It to Beaver, they were okay with Leave It to Beaver. They weren't okay with writing Flipper about the heroic dolphin, but money was money. And their real politics were far left. And Anne Marcus went on to win an Emmy for Mary Hartman. Mary Hartman, that's where her heart really was. But Flipper, yeah, I mean, how do they feel being a screenwriter for Flipper?
Heidi writes, seems like the moral is Darwinian, adapt and survive. Moved from movies to TV in the 40s and has now moved from TV to streaming.
You can see in the 50s that there are attempts by these screenwriters to do something worthwhile. Even in Westerns, you can see it in Have Gun Will Travel, where the scripts, often written by Gene Roddenberry, who's going to produce Star Trek, are serious. They're not just shoot 'em ups. So there's always that struggle between art and money, the art and survival, especially because the studio executives, I mean, the whole industry is a very strange schizoid industry. The product is reviewed in the art and entertainment sections of the newspapers, but the money appears in the financial sections of the newspapers. And how you combine that is very hard to understand. It takes a real genius to be able to produce something useful, something immortal, and yet there are people who are able to do it. John Ford was able to do it also, and Spielberg is able to do it, but a lot of people look askance at Spielberg as just kind of someone who produces middlebrow hits, and he's found that niche, and he's able to do it. I know with Ford, one of the things people were interviewing him about The Searchers, and which is one of the great westerns of all time. And he said, "Yeah, I like The Searchers. It made me money." So this is the bifurcated nature of the industry, where there is this ideal of creating art, but at the same time, the bottom line is hugely important and determinative. So Louis B. Mayer is deposed as head of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer because his movies aren't making money. What have you done for us lately? It doesn't matter that you've had a great career. What have you done recently? And that's pretty heartless. And that's partly what Sunset Boulevard is about. Again, what is striking is that it's made by someone who was a tremendous success in Hollywood. But it is also part of the early 50s hostility, movies made that are hostile to Hollywood. In a Lonely Place is one. Singing in the Rain is actually a very sad movie in many ways. The Big Knife is another one that people were struggling with the conflict between art and money. And I think in terms of my friend's parents, in the end, they were able to get both, but the passage was through Flipper.
Hey, Art, could you comment on they show the end of the movie first?
Oh, you mean that they show he's dead?
Well, basically, yeah.
Yeah. They show he's floating in the swimming pool, the shot from beneath looking up at him. That was actually a very difficult shot to do. That's Wilder being naughty. It's Wilder being experimental and saying, let's see if the audience will accept this, a dead narrator. Never mind Neff, who's dying. I can do better than that. Let's make him dead, actually dead, and go with that. And that requires a suspension of disbelief on the part of the audience, right? I don't know, when people saw it, did they go, hey, this guy is dead, he shouldn't be narrating? Did anybody actually say that? No. Vicky, how do you think Wilder got away with that?
Mute. You're muted, Vicky. Vicky, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's
always in a different place.
Yeah.
I think maybe because it was so surprising. I found it one of the most satisfying things in the film, which depressed the hell out of me, by the way.
It's a very depressed movie. It is.
It is. And the over-emoting and everything. And even while intellectually I understood it, it still annoyed me while I was watching it, which I think was part of the plan. But as a device, I think it was very clever of him. I think it was brave of him. But I like things where it's out of order in time. That's my own personal a, a, a good ability to do that smoothly without losing your audience. So that was one of the things that I really appreciated in the film.
Well, he's a genius doing that.
uh,
Rich,
Roger has a question.
Roger, then Rich.
Well, I have a comment. To me, one aspect, not the major aspect, but one aspect of this movie was there is a kind of a kind of a horror aspect to it.
Oh, yeah.
I think the monkey and Eric von Stroheim, and then of course the floating in the pool.
That's even the worst.
That really added, that gave it something else. It wasn't just the story of an old actress, but it showed some horror with it, and I thought that's what I read in it.
Yeah, I think there's gothic stuff in there. There's comedy in there, and there's horror, and there's not a mystery. He's been shot, so there. But the other thing I would just say about that is, well, I'll save that. Let's Richard.
To me, I saw the portrayal in the Norma and in Max survival techniques following the loss of the kind of life they had when she was famous, and her persona that she created for herself when she was famous gave her lots of feeling that she was well loved, and that apparently was filling a niche that needed to keep being filled. And when Joe, for example, started refusing her gifts, she said, "Please don't hate me." That was her reaction to not having her gift accepted and returned in the form of a love. But I thought Max was an important survivor in his own way, in that he began providing Norma with the kind of control that she lost. And as soon as anything happened, she had sort of a paper thin grasp on reality that had to take all the locks and the sharps away from her. And as soon as anything upset her equilibrium, she'd scream for Max, and he would come take care of it and get her back on her feet and dust her off and put her back together again. And then Max certainly took charge of her final scene by going down and being in charge of the cameras, saying, action cameras. So he made sure that her final scene was to the way that she would find acceptable.
I think the Please Don't Leave Me is really interesting. I think Hollywood stars make a big deal about being surrounded and besieged by fans, and they say they don't like it. But in fact, they're dependent on it and would feel abandoned if it wasn't happening. And that creates a relationship between the star and the audience that has its kind of sick aspect to it as well, because fans are fickle, and it doesn't take more than one or two real bad financial failures to wreck a career. An example, I'll get to you in a second, Mark. But the example is Tyrone Power was a huge star by 1941 and 1942, Mark of Zorro and all these swashbuckling films. But then he volunteered for the Marines and was flying Marine airplanes during World War II. Great, but he's gone. He's not making films. And when he returns in 1946, Daryl Zanuck, the head of 20th Century Fox, has a problem. How do I pump this guy up again? Because he's been gone for 4 years. And when you're gone in Hollywood for 4 years, you're gone. There's always somebody to take your place. So that's the ferocity of the competition, and people make compromises. Max made a compromise. The parents of my friends made compromises in order to financially survive, or to be part of the movie community in general. Okay, Mark.
I'm also interested in Max. I thought I thought he was wonderful in the movie, but it occurs to me that he was portrayed as the only other person living in that house, right? Before
Yes.
Joe shows up. And does that mean he cooks all the food? Does that mean he does the shopping? Does he I mean, like, that's a big house, of course. It was in disarray, and it just it occurs to
Wasn't
me.
keeping it up too well.
Yeah.
I think he was obsessed. The character Max is obsessed with Norma.
Mhm.
As we said, she shows a film where he was the director of the film,
Uh-huh.
and he was clearly emotionally involved with her
Mhm.
in the same way that Swanson was involved with C.B. DeMille, who I think is actually an awful person in many ways. But it's what he could get out of her as a director. But they remained friends their entire lives, even after she left Paramount.
Mm.
So for some stars and some directors, there's that connection. That's John Wayne and John Ford is another example of that. And these things, they create a kind of codependency that's going on. And again, I don't want to get too much into Ford, but Ford gets Wayne to play villains in The Searchers, which he never would have done and doesn't for any other any other director except 10 years before with Red River. But people are able to get the relationship between the director and the actor can be very personal, very personal. And the Max character doesn't want to leave Norma. He just doesn't.
Right.
Art, a question from Lori Rubin on chat.
Okay. Where is it? I don't see it.
I'll read it to you. Since the mansion was actually on Wilshire Boulevard,
Yes, it
it was
was.
an intentional decision to call it Sunset Boulevard. Do you think it was a reference to fading like the term sunset suggests?
Yes, that's why they wanted to keep Sunset Boulevard, but it was hard to find a decrepit mansion. It took them several months actually to find the mansion that would work. And if it was on Wilshire, that was good enough. And it's actually not in the west; it was in the east part of Wilshire. So yeah, but Sunset. The idea is it's sunset, and golly, there's another movie just called Sunset, which is about Wyatt Earp in Hollywood in the 20s, which is actually a terrific movie also. Cher, you're on again.
Oh, can I go afterwards?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thanks.
I thought it was really fascinating, Art, when you described how Wilder, for sort of almost maybe the first or only time, allowed Swanson to have a pretty big influence on how the film occurred, including turning it kind of into a Gothic with the mansion, the sort of decrepit old mansion, and her
Right.
as the dangerous figure within the mansion.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that relationship then kind of parallels the story where Wilder is the screenwriter
Yes.
and she is taking charge on some of the screenwriting. and he's in a subordinate position. I mean, that's kind of minor. I'm stretching a little bit. But the other comment I wanted to make is that the film itself, Sunset Boulevard, Wilder makes the exception to the rule about the older woman or older actors not being able to go on to stardom, because Swanson's 50 in actual life, and I think in as portrayed in the film, and she's fabulous, and it's a fabulous film and very successful. So it's a contradiction or an exception to what the storyline is, that it's impossible for Hollywood to deal with this.
Right. Swanson wasn't, she does make a couple of more films and does TV work also, but she really was based in New York, so that her problem was geographical rather than age. But I think the other thing to say is she must have been so charismatic because in the making of Some Like It Hot, Marilyn Monroe had very good ideas about how her character should be developed. She really did. And Wilder just wouldn't have any of it.
Mm-hmm.
He just wouldn't accept from her what he was willing to accept from Swanson. And I'm not sure why that is, because she was a great comic actress, Marilyn Monroe herself. So it's very hard to understand what's going on. And the other thing to say in terms of gender about this is that Cary Grant, also like Marilyn Monroe, would often refuse to do scenes if he didn't feel it was correct for the character. And nobody called Grant crazy.
No, but Cary Grant played Cary Grant.
Yes. If he didn't feel it was Cary Grant, then it wouldn't do it. But he got away with what Marilyn Monroe could not get away with, but what Swanson was able to get away with. So she must have been one hell of a charismatic person.
And an extremely successful film with a 50-year-old as the main actor.
But a gargoyle, but nevertheless a villain.
Yeah.
Down that line is whatever happened to Baby Jane.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Art.
Yes.
Yeah, my question has to do with the flashback technique. Last week, you asked us what the movie would have been like from the points of view of, say, Barbara Stanwyck or other characters in Double Indemnity. And in this particular movie, where there's only one possibility for a flashback, that of a dead man. The last week, I was just thinking that if we had had the point of view of Barbara Stanwyck's as a dead femme fatale, then that would have sort of given away the plot for Sunset Boulevard. We're having a flashback from a dead person. So was Billy Wilder, see what I'm saying? You're singing Billy Wilder in using again the flashback, consider the fact that, why not have the point of view of a dead person? Couldn't do it with Barbara, but he could do with William Holden. Yeah.
Maybe he thought of it as a missed opportunity.
Could have been.
And therefore he decided, because he's a genius, to just go ahead and do it and see how it worked. And again, the actual establishing shot of which is shot from below of him floating in the swimming pool was extremely difficult technically to do, and great cameramen and sights to do that.
We saw a video last night on how the shot was made. My daughter and I watched it, and they put a mirror at the bottom of the pool. So then they filmed down into the mirror, which shows the reflection of the cops on top.
Wow.
Well, it took some genius to come up with doing the business with the mirror. They said, how are we going to do this? And
yes, how are they going to do that?
Fascinating.
I think, Richard, your hand is still up.
Question. Oh. And I have a question when that's done.
Okay. Who is that?
One is Shelley, one is Susan. I wanted to comment on what seemed totally out of character, and I thought it was brilliant, if somewhat overdone, was her being Charlie Chaplin. I can't imagine why she would want to do that since she was trying to be seductive, but it did show. I thought it was brilliant. As I say,
Brilliant.
overdone, but brilliant. I mean, he wouldn't have been quite that extreme, but it was fabulous.
It was fabulous. And I think it partly inspired. There's another Marilyn Monroe movie, The Prince and the Showgirl, in which she outacts Laurence Olivier. And there's a scene where she is doing a kind of dance behind him as he's being dead serious. And it's a Charlie Chaplin kind of thing, and she's just fabulous in it. It's just an amazing sequence. So I think these actresses are actors, are really have these talents that they're able to do, and it's up to the director to get it out of them.
But why? What was it doing in the film? I mean, as I say, it seems very out of character for the character of Norma.
It shows she's multi-talented and she's a good mime. She's a good imitator. She's able to do all of that stuff. Maybe she would have been a good Salome.
To me,
Yeah.
to me, it also added another bit of creepiness to the movie.
Oh,
And
it's a little
creepiness is the piece that kind of stuck with me a lot.
Yeah.
It was delightful, not creepy, delightful.
I think she's also trying to show her lover that the silent era was really where it was at.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was brilliant. Well, I think this is the thing that I was saying, that in early sound and up and actually into the 60s, actors were far more constrained by the overhead boom microphone than they were in the silence. They were much freer in the silence in terms of physical ability. I mean, this was actually the case when with silent film, you were able to get dolly shots, you were able to get tracking shots and all of that stuff. Very hard to do in sound. And the original sound films are almost all like stage plays because that's what the microphones could do. So it was actually constraining. So you can understand why Norma Desmond would say the movies have gotten small. Because with silence, you could really have, again, tracking shots and all of that, long, fast tracking shots, all of that stuff that they could do, very inventive stuff that they could do. But the sound technology was both empowering and disempowering at the same time until technology really changes it in the 60s and makes it much more free form. Okay. Susan.
Just a quickie. I see a Billy Wilder connection between the inconsistency of a dead man flashback and in Double Indemnity, the announcement that he's unmarried and yet he wears a wedding ring.
Yeah.
Those are kind of quirky little.
Wait till we discuss Vertigo for inconsistencies.
Well, I saw it as a Billy Wilder thing, and of course, Vertigo was not Billy Wilder.
No, that's coming up next week. It's
right.
Hitchcock.
Of course, that's Alfred Hitchcock, though. I was making the connection that they were Billy Wilder.
Huge inconsistencies in the film, as we'll see. And Hitchcock
seemed like a signature.
I think disorienting the audience slightly.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Art.
So, hey, Art,
Yes.
did Billy Wilder ever thought of inserting himself into the films like Hitchcock?
No. No. He has a heavy German accent. So, no.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Art, thank you so much. What's the movie for next week, Art?
The next week, it's Vertigo. Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1958. It's in color, but it's really dark too.
Yep.
Scary.
Okay. So
All right, thank you.
it's really fun.
All
Okay.
right, that was
Thank you,
great.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Our terrific session.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jim. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
I hate to be the party pooper here, but there we go.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.